Health experts just aren't sure yet whether the warmer, more humid weather of spring in the U.S. will help slow down the spread of the new coronavirus.
And the reason we don't know it is because this is a brand new virus with which we have no experience. So even though the concept that when warm weather comes, many respiratory viruses diminish, we have no guarantee at all that this is going to happen with this virus.
There is some evidence that warmer weather can help knock down respiratory disease like flu and coronaviruses. When it's warm, people are less likely to cluster inside. When it's more humid out, the tiny droplets that spread disease can have a harder time staying viable. But there is only some very early evidence to suggest COVID-19 shows this kind of seasonal response. One study, which is so new that it still hasn't been peer-reviewed, finds coronavirus has been most likely to spread within a certain range of temperature and humidity, about 41 to 51 degrees Fahrenheit and 47 to 79% humidity. The researchers are careful to emphasize that correlation with these relatively cool temperatures does not mean cooler temperatures cause the activity. They warn that any predictions based on early data like this, quote, have to be considered with extreme caution, and say that it's too difficult right now to forecast the exact effects of warmer temperatures. Scientists need more time, not just to be sure of how this coronavirus responds to weather, but also to learn how outside factors like quarantine measures change its behavior, and even whether everyone who gets it reports symptoms.
Those are the kinds of questions that are extremely important, especially for strategies to control it, but we don't really know the answers yet. So it's this evolving science that translates into practical actions.
Okay, so the term novel, why is that term used?
Well, it's novel because novel really means new, and this is new in the sense that we, as in humans, have never known that this has existed we've only known this existed about 3 months ago is when it was first really discovered. It's probably been around for millennia, but it's only been, it's new to us. It's not really new, but it was called the novel coronavirus. And then, virologists and regulatory bodies decided to name it, SARS-CoV-2. And then the infection or the disease that it causes is called COVID 2019.
Okay, so what is so unique about this particular strain or virus?
Well, there's a few things that are unique about it. There's a few things that really aren't. The unique feature is that it's brand new to us in that we've never seen this before. So we're really learning a lot about its biology, its clinical manifestations, how it's transmitted. So there's a lot of new features for us to learn about. And I think the rapidity at which this has been done is unprecedented. I mean, we've only known this has existed for 3 months, and it's incredible how much we've learned about it. Of course, there still are lots of unanswered questions, but we have a pretty good understanding of this virus right now. But of course, there are some not so unique features. It's a respiratory virus. We sort of know other respiratory viruses, how they're transmitted, how we protect ourselves against them, how we protect transmission in community settings. So some of the same rules apply as well.
So is there enough commonality between this virus and ones that we've seen already leading into the spring? Will it follow a similar seasonality as soon as North America gets into some warmer temperatures?
Yeah, it's really tough to know how this is going to play out. And there's a few theories about what direction this is going to go. One theory is that, we're having clearly a big epidemic globally. Some might say it's a pandemic. And gradually this is just going to burn itself out and maybe go away. So that's theory one. Theory two is that we have this a large surge in cases around the world, and then it dies down a little bit, and we just sort of have year-round, low-level transmission of this virus. Not, of course, to the same extent now, but just year-round, low-level transmission. That's theory number two. And then theory number three is where we have this global surge in cases, and then it dies down, but it sort of seems to come back in the winter, just like we get seasonal influenza viruses. Maybe this will come back and we'll have a seasonal coronavirus or seasonal COVID-19 virus. And that's theory number three. No one really knows. I mean, this is all pure speculation, but really what that tells me is the key thing that really we need to work on is vaccination, because it is plausible that this will be sticking around for a while in some way or another. And in order to protect ourselves, we really need to invest heavily in a vaccine. And of course, that work has started a couple of months ago. And it takes a long time to develop a vaccine, but that's really a long-term solution to this.
So as North America starts to enter into the summer, is it possible that with us being sort of the global world that we are now, and as easy as travel is, that this switches and becomes more of a Southern Hemisphere issue through our summers up here, their winters down there?
I don't really know, to be fair, and no one really knows. That might align nicely with the seasonality component. But we have to remember that many of the normal rules are not being upheld in the context of a big epidemic. So you recall 2009, we had a big H1N1 pandemic. And, that's an H1N1, that's an influenza virus, that's supposed to be a winter virus. But that exploded in the summertime, and there were tons and tons of cases in the summertime. So, I don't think the same rules for seasonality necessarily apply in the context of an epidemic. After the epidemic, after this epidemic or pandemic, whatever we want to call it, maybe that will happen and there will be a seasonal component, but no one's sure. This is pure speculation for now.
So you're saying that there is an initial introduction into a population, that it has the potential to spread rapidly, and then it just sort of plateaus and then may start following in the seasonal norms of what we would see with the common cold or the flu?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen is we're going to see this rise in cases globally, which we're seeing right now. It'll at some point it'll peak, and we'll start to see waning of cases, as is being seen right now in China, and maybe early signs in Korea. And then comes the big question mark. Then it's, is this just going to peter out and die out? Or is this going to just have very low levels of transmission year round? Or is this going to come back in the cooler months in the wintertime, and much like we see seasonal influenza? So one of those three things is going to happen. No one's entirely sure which one, although people have very strong opinions one way or another.
Is there any speculation as to how long sort of that initial bright burn phase is with something like this? Are we talking about like 2 more months and then it sort of conveniently falls into that transition into seasonality? Or is it something that this could last 6 months on the initial phase?
Yeah, so short answer, nobody has a clue. Long answer, we think we have a clue because we can sort of model it. A lot of this really depends on how the global response goes. And, if we really see some of the social distancing measures employed and some of these travel restrictions and sort of methods that we know can slow down transmission of this virus, this might actually prolong the epidemic. But what it will do is it will blunt the peak of the epidemic, and it'll just make it a more flattened curve, which is actually a good thing. People might think, well, why would you want to prolong this? But the reason you want to prolong it is because if you have these huge peaks in cases, that means even though a small proportion of people get really sick and need to be hospitalized with this, if the absolute number of people infected is so great, those peaks will result in a high burden of hospital use. And that can overwhelm a healthcare system. We saw that in Hubei province. So, it's better to really employ these control measures, mainly through social distancing, and flatten that peak so that it might be a little more prolonged, but you just don't get those big peaks in cases.
Okay, so is there anything that actually comes into play with a virus like this and the weather changing, or is it something that can be more tied to people's activity during those seasons?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, we know that many coronaviruses are fond of colder temperatures, but in the context of an epidemic, it's hard to say if the climate and temperature will actually have a role. So it's really hard to know if that's going to be a major component to how this epidemic plays out. Certainly, if this virus sticks around after this epidemic, temperature may come into play if we see some component of seasonality, but it's just hard to know during the course of an epidemic how the temperature will really affect it. Some people think it'll burn out in the summer months. Other people think, there's no chance for that happening as long as there's transmission going on in a susceptible population. It'll keep going. But this is sadly, this is a bit of a wait and see approach. And really, what we need to do is prepare for the scenario where weather does not affect the epidemic, and we're prepared for that as well.
So, what does that look like? What sort of preparation are we talking?
Well, in general, I think the preparation, we have to think of this on several fronts. One is the individual front. There's a sort of a healthcare system front, and then there's a larger organization front. From a healthcare system standpoint, we need obviously to have capacity in outpatient clinics so that people don't have to go to hospital for testing and don't have to go to hospital for care, because we know many people won't need it. So standalone clinics are starting to pop up around Canada, and we'll likely continue to see these pop up over the weeks to come. And that just keeps people out of hospital and keeps people home, recovering in the comfort of their own home. We need expanded diagnostic testing, which is also happening and happened in Canada. And we really need to ensure that we have the appropriate hospital capacity to manage the potential of a surge in cases if it comes to that. So that's from the hospital level. From an organization standpoint, so businesses and other companies and schools, I think we have to have a lot of flexibility here. And if there seems to be a large rise in cases, there may be policies enacted that facilitate social distancing, meaning enabling people to work from home, maybe doing schools staggered and not having all the students at one time in a school, or maybe having some homeschool sessions as well. Really changing how we go about day-to-day life so that there's more distance between people and not the same degree of large congregations of individuals under one roof where we know this infection can be transmitted. I think there also needs to be a lot of flexibility with ensuring that people who are unwell don't come to work. Many companies have policies of sick days or vacation days, but now's not the time to be stingy.